Everyone ready to start? We got handicap parking right up here if you need it. Welcome. This is our spring Trailblazer session. Appreciate everyone coming. My name is Todd Hunter with Systemware. Anyone that's new to the group, if I could see the hands. Great, welcome. A lot of love in the room. No, we're trying to expand because a lot of you work in Scrum teams with developers that we invited a couple developers to participate. I think it's good to appreciate each other's art and science to what we do. Certainly the end result is a team effort. So I wanted to review the agenda real quick. Everyone should have it in front of you. We're going to start off with Chris Slocum from MedAssets, talking about how he misses being a nerd. And then we're going to have a little bit of fun with some game, with some valuable prizes for participants. Do we have participants yet? Captains and... All right. So we're going to have a QA feud, and I think everyone will learn a lot from going through that. And then Greg Pascal from Argo is going to lead test automation, return on investment robbers. So a lot of the business justification that comes into a lot of the testing and making that through the business side, talk about that. And then Mr. Tim Lyon for, it's not a movie, but a presentation on Vision Quest, the rite of passage to executing upon delivery. So we've got a full slate. As I always say, this is your session. So make sure you ask questions, raise your hand. We'll have some microphones passed around. But get out of this everything that you can. We're here for a half day, and it's all for you, your benefit. A couple of logistics. As I said, the parking garage will have tokens at the front desk. So before you leave, make sure you get one of those. Our restrooms are just past reception, first hallway on the left. So if you need those. And then I'm trying to regain the title here. Last session we had Reggie Corbin lead the session. So I've been elected to come back as your MC and reinstitute some fun facts. But this time it's quotes to live by. And I tried to kind of put myself in the shoes of a QA expert or maybe a developer. So I've got a couple of quotes, and you'll hear more of these as we go through the session. The first one. If at first you don't succeed, call it version 1.0. These might be a little geek quotes, actually. The glass is neither half full nor half empty. It's twice as big as it needs to be. Passwords are like underwear. You shouldn't leave them out where people can see them. You should change them regularly, and you shouldn't loan them out to strangers. All right, Chris Slocum.
Testing 1, 2. Ooh. I think I'm probably loud enough without this, but I think there's folks on the phone that want to hear. Yes, please. Okay. So the last time I was here, I presented, it's just a text box. And that was more of an educational piece. I don't want to do anything else educational, so don't expect to learn anything from what I'm doing today. Today I get to be the crotchety old man. These are some scenarios and situations that I've seen in my time in QA. I miss being a nerd. This is more of a tirade on our technology culture and some of the impacts that that may have on people's perception of QA, dev, technology in general. AKA, this will click forward. All right, give me just a second here. There we go. AKA, get off my lawn. So if I strike a nerve with anybody, it's all in good fun. There may be some things in here that people want to take personal. They're not. These are generalizations. They're things that I've run across in incidents that I've seen. For safety's sake, let's say that friends have seen these things. These are all from a friend's experience. Poking people with sticks is a hobby of mine. I enjoy doing that. As QA, I think we all kind of enjoy that as an aspect of our jobs. We get to poke people and go, hey, that's wrong. It's kind of fun. Who am I? Those of you that have been here before or who have worked with me in the past, you kind of know who I am. I've been doing QA for about 20 years. I've worked at every level of QA, from individual contributor up to acting director. I've worked in various industries, including healthcare, broadcast television, mortgage, a little bit of everything, and all of the associated life cycles that have gone along with that over the past 20 years. Currently, lead QA engineer at MedAssets. A little deeper view, though, who am I? I'm a nerd. I'm a child of the 70s. My parents were radio engineers and DJs in the 60s. So they were early adopters in a lot of technologies. And growing up, I got to be the benefactor of that. I got to play with fun stuff. I got to play with 8-track and recording onto 8-track. I got to fiddle with all kinds of fun stuff. I collected comic books. I still do from time to time. I played Dungeons and Dragons. I still do from time to time. So I'm still a nerd. I still have a good time with these things. As a computer nerd, if anybody wants to read that, you're welcome to, but basically, I've been playing with computers my entire life. I've had an opportunity to do all kinds of fun stuff. I see some smirks and smiles. Some of y'all lived this. Some of you have done these things. You know some of these references. Yes. Yes. I got to work on a Trash 80. I love those things. Yeah, I had a very short-lived one, and I don't remember the number on it, but it had a non-polarized DC plug. So you had a 50-50 shot every time you plugged it in of letting the magic smoke out. Didn't last very long, so I got to play with a bunch of those. I believe that was the one. So I've been there, I've done that. I've played with a lot of these things over the years. Got into the web in what I considered fairly early days, writing web pages in Notepad back in '95, building the graphics for it. So I worked at a graphics company. We needed to know how it was going to function. So I've done a lot of these things. BBSs, anybody? A couple of folks? Yeah. Just for fun. Who actually owned one of these and had one sitting on their desk? A few folks, yeah. Acoustic coupler? Yes. Yeah, that was the early version of the modem. You had your handset and you set it down on there. That was the modem. I worked with those. I played with this stuff. Everything on this screen I either owned or got to play with. PET? Yeah, with the 8-inch floppy drive and everything. My TI-800 that I had a cassette player with it. I had to play with these things. Where is this going? So what? Okay, you're a nerd. Big deal. If you look at the current state of technologies, the U.S. is lagging behind most of the first world countries. So if we look at the fact that about 90% of the households have at least one computer in them, we're behind the curve on that. There are parts of Europe and Asia where it's darn close to 100%. It's very difficult to get numbers on smartphones because how many people in this room have multiple smartphones? Yeah, so it's hard to get an accurate measure of how much of the population has them because a bunch of us have a collection of them. The numbers that they're talking about, though, we're looking at 90+% of people are using smartphones, so they're used to technology and dealing with it on a daily basis. As of 2014, 74% of their online adults use social networking sites. People are used to this. They interact with the systems, and they do this all the time. Students headed to college were born in '96. I had been married for a year, doing QA for a year and a half, almost 2 years, doing IT stuff, building computers for almost a decade. Whenever the class that's going to college right now were born, these people have never known a world without the internet. They really haven't known a world without smartphones, without everybody having a cell phone, a cell number. These things that we look at today as a novel piece of life is life to a lot of these folks. They've never known a world without it. This has created a technology culture, a nerd culture. Everybody's a nerd. Everybody is a technologist now because they know how a website works. So they know how our jobs are done. There's no magic. What we do is not special to a lot of these people because everybody's a technologist now. Anybody can reboot their phone. Poof, they're a technologist. Some examples, things that I've run into, things that make me go, get off my lawn on a daily basis, and things that I've encountered in the past. These are all from a friend's viewpoint. Cautionary tale. We need a text file listing. We want this listing of all of the RTP files in a given directory structure. May have subdirectories in there. And we need that in a text file because it's going to be consumed by another process. What kind of solution do we come up with for this? I see people remembering their DOS commands. Yes. Yeah, so that was my solution. Okay, so I went off and I spent 2 minutes. 2 minutes because I had to dust off the brain cells and go, wait, pipe/ON for order by name. I had to remember how to do that. A developer went off, 22-year-old developer went off and built a UI to do this. He built a UI. He built a program to do this. He spent 2 hours building a UI, a front end, and it was pretty, but he spent 2 hours doing something that took 2 minutes or less to do, but he did it because he wasn't familiar with the old technologies. Learn the basics. Even if you don't know them now, understand the underlayment to the systems that you're working on and get an appreciation for what those basics are. You can't actually afford a UI UX person. So that new search box that we're going to add on there, they can do what Amazon does. Just do what theirs does. Really? Is that really what you want? You sure that's what you want? Had to put that on there. Understand who your customers are. In this case, my friend's company, they weren't Amazon. The customer base is not the same. The functionality is not the same. The expectation of the user base is not the same. For somebody to come up and tell me, make it do what Amazon does. Really? Pretty sure that's not what you want. Try and elicit people to have a better respect for what these things are. Understand that whenever Amazon put their search feature in, probably thousands of man-hours went into evolving that and developing it, defining what the requirements were, understanding who the users are. Know who those people are and what you actually need So it's our job to help people understand those things so that they don't say, well, make it do what Amazon does. That's fine. This one we actually, a friend of mine encountered earlier this year. Developer is working on his stuff. Daughter says, hey, what is it that you're doing? He tries to explain. I'm building websites. This is what I do, for a living, and I build these websites. And the daughter's question was, why don't you use Weebly? Those of you who are not familiar with Weebly and Wix, there are sites out there. There are third parties that you can go onto and you can build a custom website for free. You can build your own website on Weebly or Wix. Well, why don't you just use that? And it's indicative of a mindset, not just from a developer's daughter, but people in general. We do a poor job as QA, as devs, we do a poor job of getting people to understand our value and what it is that we do on a daily basis. So we fail at that. There's this growing perception that anybody can do that because it's so easy. Couldn't resist this one either. Yeah, by the way, if any of these strike a nerve or if anybody gets really upset at me, just throw things. It's fine. I'm okay with that. The code project, I think, is a wonderful thing to get people trained up and teach them how to code and so they can learn to code. But when you take somebody who's not a coder and you put them in there and go, look, they can code. Get off my lawn. So what's the difference? How is QA really any different than a developer testing their stuff? The developer created it. Why can't they just go ahead and test it? Yeah. Yes. Actual, honest to goodness experience. My friend was very put off by this and decided not to work at that particular company. But there's an idea that starts to become a recurring theme, and that's that QA is sort of this introductory thing. It's a low level. And we need to get people to understand that there's more to it and more to what we work on. I've encountered this one more times than I care to admit. Actually, my friend has encountered this more times than I care to admit. I think we've probably all seen this at least once. And it's not a knock on anybody. It's not an attack. It's an observation that says there's a skill set involved. And if you don't have that skill set, you may not be well suited. My opinion, I do. I miss the good old days. Managers were people who were individual contributors. They worked, they knew the process, they knew the people, they knew the company. They worked their way up through the ranks and they became managers, they became leaders. They were leaders already, and they got that position and that title. And they were able to lead because they knew what they were doing and people respected them in the positions that they were in. More than a couple of times, I have had to help managers or higher level folks replace a CD-ROM drive, do fairly basic stuff, change their password on Windows. I've had to do these things. It is difficult to have a technology respect for a leader who cannot hold their own in a technology arena. Oh yeah, by the way, he lasted 3 months, almost crashed the department, and got booted. So there's there's some evidence behind this to bore it out. Automate that so we don't have to test it again. We had this awesome vendor come in, and this vendor, this is going to fix everything. Product X, as soon as we get all of our stuff automated, we can fire the QA people. We can get rid of all of these. It will be faster. We can move quicker to respond to things. We don't need the developers after a while, and then eventually this thing will feed my goldfish. It's going to do everything for you. If you've ever had to deal with vendors for technologies, I think we've all seen this. You get a vendor that comes in and says, we're going to solve your problem. Here's the product that does everything you need it to. No matter what it is, it does everything you need it to. And it was custom made for your company and your application, and it does all of it. I go back to a quote from Bill Gates. I like this one. And I think it sums up my response to that fairly well. Automation's not going to fix anything. Paul's going to start throwing things at me here in a minute, but that's okay. No, he's actually going to say the exact same thing. It doesn't fix anything. If you have bad processes, fantastic. You're going to hit them faster. If you have inefficiencies, they're going to be magnified. Automation is a magnifying glass on whatever it is that you're looking at. You get to see all of those imperfections faster. None of us have ever encountered this one. There is nothing wrong with any of these folks being in QA, with the exception of maybe the last one here. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you move into a position and you're given this, here's your team. These are your QA people. None of them have QA background. We can work with that. We can teach people. We can get them up to speed, and we can work with them on things. None of them have any interest in QA. Most of these folks are on their way to something else, or their expertise lies elsewhere. If their passion is elsewhere, they need to be elsewhere. They need to do the job function they are passionate about. I have had some phenomenal people come into QA with a business background or with some other background and do an amazing job testing and doing the QA functions. They had a passion for it, and they enjoyed it. They had a good time with it. But when you give me people who are working on some other degree and they don't have an interest in it, they're just there because they may happen to be one of the director's daughters and need an internship for the summer. This friend of mine has had some really strange experiences. If people aren't passionate about it, they're not going to do a good job with it across the board. So if you take somebody and you stick them in there, there's a quote from one of the books that I'd read long ago, and I forget the author on it, but it was essentially, if you take someone who is a grocer and you stick him behind a machine gun, if you conscript someone into a military position, he'd be better off throwing cabbage than to have the gun in his hand, because that's not what they're there for. If their passion and their skill set is a different place, they should be a different place. That's sort of the idea that says that, well, anybody can be a tester. Yes, but not everyone can be a great tester, and not everyone can be a QA professional. There's a different skill set there, and we want to try and build that and help people understand what it is. Again, my friend has no problem with a QA person being able to do any of these things. Maybe not that last one there, but still. To have an additional skill set is a fantastic thing. I can passively write a couple of requirements, but hopefully not for the system that I'm going to be testing. I can do some SQL queries, and I need to do that in order to fulfill my job. But to take that person and say, hey, would you write the SQL query that's then going to get rolled into production? Please, God, don't have QA people doing that. Demo for the product owner. Meh, double-edged sword there. You may do a fantastic job because you know where all of the pitfalls are. But I don't know about y'all, but I inadvertently break shit from time to time just because I'm using it. It's not necessarily that I mean to, but I'm a QA person. I break things. Might not be the right person that you want demoing to the product owner or particularly to the public. Respect the discipline. And that's really the crux of what most of these come down to is, I said before, we, QA, dev, the professionals at our level, we do a poor job of communicating to the outside world our value. Why do you need us to do this? And it isn't because, well, we're going to test it and find all the bugs. It's beyond that. We're going to do risk analysis. We're going to help you understand what those risks are. We're going to apply different techniques that we've learned over the years, and we're going to do a more in-depth job than a junior level tester. We don't want QA people writing the code. They may write some automation, they may work on that, but we don't want them writing the code. If I have a SQL question, if I have a database question, I would really like to find a DBA to ask that question of. Not because my developer doesn't know, but because the DBA's expertise lies in databases. Their structure and their background, everything about them, that's where their passion is at. Respect that and ask the right questions of them. Try and get people to respect the disciplines that are going on around in all areas. And ask the right questions of the right people and put the right people in the right places for that. That's it. It's a short tirade, and the idea being, I miss being a nerd. I miss being one of those people that were technologically savvy. We could do things that other people couldn't do at one point in time. A decade ago, we could create websites and other people couldn't. 2 decades ago, we built computers. Right, 3 decades plus ago, we built computers, and other people didn't do that. We had skill sets that not everybody had. We've moved into a different age, and now that people are becoming more technologically savvy, we have to stay slightly ahead of that curve in order to be effective at what we do to deliver a good product to people. And that's it. Thank you all for listening to me rant on this topic. And thanks to STPCon in November of last year, I am now on Twitter because apparently people were tweeting while I was presenting. So I had to get onto Twitter and figure out what that was all about. So thank you all very much.
Any questions for Chris? None? Wow. All right, comment.
Trying to figure out the most dangerous person who's trying to figure out what's happening in QA is someone who actually thinks they know something about it. You know, if you get somebody who has absolutely no experience in testing, they're sort of they haven't reached that level of nerd, if you will, right? So they're sitting there going, yeah, I don't really understand this, so I'm going to let the experts handle it. Then you get the guy who's trying to build his house from parts at Home Depot kind of thing, right? They don't really know what they're doing. They're like, I got this. Yeah, we'll just get like a couple high school kids and we'll have this test fit. We'll spend like $5 an hour, right? And that's really where the danger comes in, right? So it's they haven't reached true nerd potential, right? It's sort of, yes, you can build a website on Woodley, or if you go back a bunch more years, like GeoCity, right? That kind of thing, right? But was it a real website? No, not really. Really, it wasn't, right? But folks not in the know didn't, right? So seeing some really dangerous decisions get made because people weren't aware of the expertise that's actually required from many of the disciplines. Right? Same thing with DBAs, right? You're like, oh, this is a simple query. Really? No, it's really not. Respect the discipline.
Any other comments, questions? There's one.
So, Chris, some of the debate right now in our world is are testers going to be relevant in the future? So how would you answer that with kind of your retrospective? If you're looking forward, what does that look like to you?
Test. Okay. That one to me is kind of fun because I have a little bit of a pet peeve on the terminology of tester versus QA, and I think that both will always be relevant, but our skill set has to grow to encompass whatever the challenges are. There will never be a point whenever the risks don't need to be analyzed, whenever doing some type of a matrix of what the available test scenarios are, and then pairwise analysis, any of these kinds of things that your first-year QA person that you pull off the street, they're not going to understand these things. So those folks to me are relegated more to the testing side of things, and they will always be needed because no matter how good the developer is and how much automated testing is in place, how many frameworks you've got, how many automated test cases, unit tests, and all of those things, no matter how many of those are in place, you will always need a human to look at it and validate certain aspects of it. If we look 50, 100 years in the future and an AI is capable of doing some of those things, fine, we'll have the discussion again. But until we get there, you're always going to need a human who is able to do those things. That tester versus QA thing, though, it's always been one of those pet peeves of mine. I prefer that if someone is a tester, that's what they do. You set them down, you give them the product, and you go follow these test cases or these test scenarios that have been created by a quality assurance professional who has done the analysis work and all of the heavy lifting. And you're going to go through and you're going to do something that at some point in the future, possibly a computer could take over, but you'll always need that person up front with the higher skill set to build those things. Developers, I see kind of the same way. Developers will always be necessary, and they're always creating the next generation of things. A developer had to create Weebly. They had to define what those requirements were. To enable somebody else to do their job, you had to have good developers, hopefully good BAs, and good QA people helping define what that thing is to make other people's life easier. That help?
Sounds good.
Okay, let's get started. It's feud time. Is Brian ready? Well, I need to run here. You want to line up right back here? We need to switch sides? Yeah, we need to switch sides. And your host, Richard Dawson.
Hello, hello, can you hear me? All right, so this is our first shot at the Family Feud here, or the QA Feud. Please bear with us as we work through any logistical weirdnesses, but go ahead and hit the button. So our first family is the Context Drivens. No, the Context Drivens.
Hey!
Yep. And the other family is the Certifications.
Hey!
All right, on your mark, let's start the Family Feud. Yeah, I'm gonna have way too much fun with this.
Does they know the button?
Yes. So you got you'll be the Z, you'll be the slash. All right. No. All right. First question. The very long intro. Okay, top 5 answers on the board. Name a common test automation myth. Brian.
You can automate everything.
Survey says. Number 1 answer. You want to keep it, or do you want to pass? All right, y'all are going to play. That's all right, I'll kind of guide us through. You go back to your family, there'll be no kissing. Flu season, RSV, no. Yeah.
We decide if we want to give it.
All right. So who do we have here?
Brian.
Hey, Brian. All right. So, name a common test automation myth.
Where do these answers come from, sir?
The audience.
I'm not stalling.
The audience a year ago.
Okay.
5 seconds. Got to give him a strike.
That's all right.
All right. Okay, who
One at a time, though. It's not a
do we have here? That is correct. No conferring.
No convert.
All right.
All right.
So, name a common test automation myth.
Any tool can automate.
Oh, second strike. So you got one more chance, one more strike, then the certifications get a chance to steal. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Amber from Argo.
Amber from Argo is also one of our developer guests. Say hello. All right. Test automation myth.
It'll find all the bugs.
Find all the bugs. Oh, third strike. So now, over to the certifications. You just have to get one answer, and you get the points. What do you say?
We're going to go with replaces QA people.
And? Survey says? Oh! And the contracts driven win. Okay, so let's see what the other answers were. Number 2, Oh, yeah, they get the points. Okay, y'all switch sides. So we got to work off all those cookies. Okay, answer number 2. It's faster. Number 3, testing is push button. Number 4, record and playback. Regression testing. All right. Now, that did not go nearly as well as I expected. Okay, question number 2. Let's get our next 2 contestants up. Okay, are we ready? So you're the Z and you're the Flash. Name an author with at least one QA-related published book. Brian.
Oh, Brian?
Yes.
Wait.
Is that spelled S-C-H-I-T-T? 5 seconds.
Like I'm pretty sure I'm reading one for the certification test. I'm gonna say
He's done.
Williams.
Show me Williams. Okay, over to you.
Rex Black.
Show me Rex Black. No. He's number 4. There we go. Rex Black. Okay. Do y'all want to keep it, or do y'all want to play it?
Keep it.
All right. And you, young man, what's your name?
My name is Mike. Hello, Mike. I'm just going to stop right there. Okay. Name an author with at least one QA published book. Ooh. Give him the fail button. Oh, strike 1. And you, good sir, what's your name?
Rodney Kono.
Hello, Rodney Kono. We'll get to that later. Name an author with at least one QA published book.
Let's go with Bach.
Give me a Bach.
It is.
James Bach. Very nice. You, young lady, your name?
Chelsea, not Kono.
Chelsea, not Kono. Nice to meet you. Author with one QA-related book, at least one QA-related book. Give me Kim Kaner. Nice. Nicely done. Back to the top of the batting order, Mr. Kono.
I'm going to have to go with
Elizabeth Hendrickson. Number 1 answer. Mr. Mark? Getting down to the end, getting a little tougher. Still got the number 2. Very popular. 5 seconds. Do we have a Rick Craig? Second strike, one last strike. CC, Mike, what do we have left?
Dickerson?
Show me Dickerson. Okay, now it's time for the contexters to steal. 2 answers left on the board. Show me James Whitaker. They get the points. Nice. Nicely done. Okay, who's left? Number 6. Brooker. All right, let's keep the game going, and let's get our next 2 contestants. Jeff and CC. Next question, top 5 answers on the board. Name a testing-related website. Mike. Show me Google. I think that should have been a legitimate answer, but nobody, but it's not. But nobody said it, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So,
Sticky Mind.
show me sticky minds. Number one answer. Play or pass? Need an answer. Need an answer. Okay, I'm gonna take it. So you and then, what's your name, young sir?
John.
John. Welcome to the show. Name a testing-related website. Testing-related website.
Stack Overflow.
Stack Overflow. So now we're back at the top of the order. Mr. Mills. All right. Testing-related website.
Elizabeth Hendrickson's blog.
Show me Elizabeth Hendrickson's blog. Second strike. All right, one more chance. Four answers left on the board. Brian, testing-related website.
ISTQB.
Show me ISTQB. Oh, still alive? Still alive. Very good, very good. All right, testing-related website.
HP Runner.
Show me HP Runner. Ooh, you can steal. One answer gets a steal. Testing-related website.
We're going to go with James Boxlight, Satisfice.
Show me satisfice.com. No. The context. The context-driven get the points. No. Oh, these guys. All right, so let's look at the remaining answers. Number 2, astqb.org. Number 3, sqe.com. Number 4, softwaretesting.com. All right, let's get the next contestants up.
No, there's no multipliers in this one, yeah. Do you think the buttons are backwards on the keyboard? Ah. Do that.
I tried to rig it in your favor, man. I worked for you, not him. But you can't even do cheat right. A non-tester? A non-tester. All right. Name a way to know that you are finished testing. Rodney. The answer is not. It is dark outside.
All the tests have been run.
All the tests have been run. Yeah, let's give him 4. All right. So if you can get one higher, wait a minute. Yeah.
I'll say test
Give me one that's higher than number 4. A way to know that you are finished testing.
You're out of time.
Show me out of time. Oh. Okay, y'all are gonna. Okay, you're gonna pass. It's over to you. So, name a way to show that you are done testing. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's go in order. So, who's next? After. So, oh. Yep. Go to Jeff.
You're out of money.
Show me out of money.
7.
There you go. Mr. Bryan. Way that you are done testing. No more bugs. You're not finding any more bugs. All right, very nice, very nice. Yes. Isn't it? but the more you get and the more popular ones you get, the less chance they have of getting it right. It's an odds thing. That's true as well. There's another way to look at this. Okay, a way to know when you are finished testing.
You tested all alternate paths.
Tested all alternate paths. Remember, these are not necessarily bad answers. It's just that the audience a year ago did not pick them. Okay. You have met your test coverage objectives. Oh, yeah, what the hell? 3. All right, next.
I'm going to say you're never done testing.
Show me never done testing. No, wait. No, there's a never. Yeah, 2. Number 2. Never. Right on. Strong word. Strong word.
Bugs are not getting returned.
Bugs are not getting returned. Second strike. 1 strike left. 4 answers left on the board. What do you got, Brian?
It seems like it should be so easy, but 5 seconds. You've met all of the acceptance criteria. That's
Show me met the acceptance criteria. Close enough. The opinion of the judge is final. That is not my problem. That is your problem. Okay, when are you finished testing?
Five seconds.
I don't get any more air. No, we already said bug finding. Not worth testing anymore.
It's not worth testing anymore. Okay, chance to steal. Chance to steal. What are we going to go with?
We're going with all planned tests have been run.
All planned tests have been run. And the context-drivens get the points. Oh. All right, let's look at the answers. Number 6, product released. Number 9, acceptable risk. And number 10, product retired. I guess it's not much use testing on a retired product. The game was to 300, so we now go on to fast money. Fast money. Well, that means you got to go sit down. Sit down. You're done. Whoops. That's the fast money is when you got the one guy up here answering stuff and somebody else is off in the secluded isolation booth. Yeah. So this is the winning team. They're just going to get. This is style points. Yes, consolation prize is all you can eat cookies. All right. So I need 2 contestants from this team. All right. Okay, so who's going to go first, and who's going to go in the isolation booth? All right, all right. Sally will take you to the isolation booth. Okay, so we're going to go slightly analog, slightly digital on this. Yeah, exactly. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have somebody take notes. We just scribble down what he says real quick because the software is really strict on the time and really bad at typing. It has not been user acceptance test appropriately. Yeah. Yes, I'm going to explain it to you. So what's going to happen is I'm going to ask you 5 different things, and in 15 seconds, so start the timer at 15 seconds. I'm going to ask you 5 things. You say the first thing that comes to mind, like name a color. You'll say blue, but it'll all be related to testing stuff. Then you're going to get points for any that you get that match existing answers. All right? Then your partner is going to come back in. We're going to do the same thing to him, but he can't repeat any of the answers that you gave. All right? You seem very... No, you get 15 seconds total, so we're going to go quick. You say pass. Judgmental? Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's why she's just going to scribble down stuff as he spews it out. Then we'll type it all in after. Because I prototyped with this. Yes, I tested a little bit. And you can't do it in 15 seconds. No. Thank you for your generosity. Your altruism, Rodney. All right, here we go. Yes, time starts when he says the first answer. Name a testing tool or product. Name a reason for poor software quality. Name a reason for poor software quality. Name an element on a defect report. Name a high-cost area of test automation. Yeah, I'm gonna take the blame. I'm gonna take the blame for that. I stumbled. Name a high-cost area of test automation. Name an automation language. All right. So. Yeah, so no answer for number 3. JavaScript. And then now I think it's page down. Yes. So then page down. So name a testing tool or product. He said QTP. Survey said number 5. 6 points. Name a reason for poor software quality. He said bad tester to dev ratio. 0. and a raspberry. Number 3, also raspberry. Number 4, name a high-cost area of test automation. None there. Name a language used for test automation. 4. Total 10 points. 200. No. Okay, let's bring in the other victim. Oh yeah, yes, got to hit the page down and they get covered. Okay. Next contestant, please.
come back and look at it and go, oh. You have to get a better. You have to go 200. It's really hard when you're over there, man.
Okay, Jeff, welcome back. Why don't you come on and stand right here so that you can't see the board, right? Can't see the board. And then Todd is going, I think it's down because you want to uncover the answers. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Your partner only got 10 points. You got to get 190. Nope.
Thanks, dude.
No pressure.
No.
Okay, now page up, I think. Yes. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to ask you a question. Answer the first thing that comes to mind. If you repeat an answer, we'll say, nope, you got to come up with another one because you can't give any of the answers he already gave. You're going to get about 20 seconds, but we're going to play kind of fast and loose with that. Okay, you ready? Time starts when you give the first answer. Name a testing product or tool. Name a reason for poor software quality. Name an element of a defect report.
Open by date.
Name a high-cost area of test automation.
Buying a tool.
Name a language for automation. All right, very good. Yes, you can turn around and look now.
Buying the tool.
All right, so name a testing tool or product. You said Soap UI. Survey said number one answer was Quality Center or ALM. Name a reason for poor software quality. You said poor requirements. Number one answer. Survey. Number three, name an element of a defect report. You said open by date. Survey said number one answer was steps to reproduce. Number five, name a high-cost area for test automation. You said buying the tool. Number one answer was maintenance. What is it that you do for FedEx?
Test automation.
Just checking.
I was under pressure.
Name a language for test automation. You said Python. Number one answer was VB Script. What tool do you use over there or previously used at FedEx?
Yeah. I was assuming he said that.
Oh, okay. Okay, hey, nice save. Nice save. Show me Python. Ooh. But hey, y'all are still the winners. You didn't win the big fat money, but you won like the skinny money. Congratulations. We'll hand it over back to our MC, Don Pardo.
Lisa, do we have valuable prizes? I gave one job to Lisa today. Thank you for playing. So thanks everyone for participating. The point of this kill it. Congratulations, winners. So the point was to, talk about some of these concepts, go through this questionnaire. We did do this survey a year ago, so the audience participated, and those were the actual responses from you, believe it or not. Maybe times have shifted since a year, but we can do that again. It was a lot of fun. So thanks, everyone. Sorry. Kono team.
Still have half the questions left.
Okay, let's take 5 minutes, and then we'll restart. Thanks. Okay, let's get started again. Everyone ready? 1,000 words are worth a picture, and they load a heck of a lot faster. I would love to change the world, but they won't give me the source code. There are 10 types of people in the world: those who understand binary and those that don't. Greg Pascal.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah. Oh, it's good to be here today with you all. I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic today because it's one of those things after being involved in test automation for quite a long time. Actually, you know, I've been in some form of test automation for over 30 years, if you can believe that. I started when I was in the aerospace. I was about 19 years old when I first got my feet wet in it. We were kind of laughing at the presentation we had earlier. There was a computer up there. It was the first one I ever got my hands on. It was a PET 2001. And so it goes way back. But in those days, we were automating for hardware. It wasn't software. I was working on a flight hardware that was launched into space and satellite systems. And automation was done on Apple IIs and early Macs and things like that. And how times have really evolved. My first exposure to the test automation we would be familiar with was with a product called WinRunner. We all know that. It converted into QTP, and now it's called UFT. And like many companies, I was working for Kinko's at the time, and a good friend of mine who had asked me to come out and work for them handed me this box, and he said, "Here, we spent a lot of money on this. It's been sitting in the closet forever because no one can figure it out. Can you do something with it?" And that was my introduction to more modern-day test automation. That's how it got started. Well, today I want to talk to you about, I've got kind of a silly name for it, but I'm calling them ROI robbers. And they're things that I've started to identify can be very common in the areas of test automation. They're the things we run into all the time. So they're the things that really detract from it becoming exceptional and something people are like, "That's a good idea, let's go do that." And so I've picked a couple of them today we're going to go over. Believe it or not, this list continues to grow, and at one point here I've got a handout for you, and I'm actually going to show you all of the ones I've identified to date, and we could do some Q&A off of that. But we must start with a story. So once upon a time, there was a framework called KRAD. Some of my friends here, they know exactly what that is. And we had this QA manager. He was a great guy, a really great guy. And he told us, "You know what, I got this thing that's going to really help save the day." And he goes away over the weekend, and he comes back Monday, and he's like, "Guys, I got to show you." I think Jeff was there when this happened. "I got to show you what I got. This is so cool." And so we were told that this framework was going to save the day. It was amazing. And then came the time for the reveal. So as we looked at it, we were greeted by lots of spreadsheets. I'm talking lots of spreadsheets. They went on forever. There must have been a dozen of them at least. And he explained how each spreadsheet was going to do all kinds of amazing things. There was one called names. There was one called accounts. There was one called products. And it just went on and on and on and on like this. We were told this: in order to build a test case, you simply pull aspects of these various spreadsheets, and the test will magically start running. I'm like, wow, that's something else. So these test cases, what they did, or these spreadsheets, made endless references to all these spreadsheets. And what we quickly found, I think Jeff and I were like, kind of given I don't know about this, as we were hearing about this, how this thing worked. But it was just a barrage of never-ending spreadsheets. And slowly we heard the Twilight Zone theme playing in the background. We're like, what are we really looking at here? It wasn't the best thing we'd ever seen. What was the thing that our manager created? It seems like the only thing that was really intuitive about it is we were going to learn a lot about Excel, okay, at the end of the day. I wasn't sure we were going to test anything. And at that point in time, now looking back on it, I realized that I first encountered my first ROI robber. The very first one I saw was in this framework. So let's talk about, we always use these acronyms, right, in QA space, just to make sure what ROI means, right? It's something, and does it really matter? So ROI, I mean, simply means return on investment. And it's a measurement of how much effort I put into something. What am I going to get back from it? Is it worth my time? That's really what we care about when we're thinking about ROI. You spend a certain amount of time, you're building something, whatever it might be, and is it going to be worth it? Was that money well spent? All right, has everybody got the general idea with ROI, what that concept is, right? I would imagine in this room we do. Let's just make sure it's a foundation because we're talking about things that eat away at that. ROI is really tough to hit in automation. How many of you know that firsthand? Not a surprise, okay? Very hard to hit in automation. There are many factors that can rob the ROI right out of an application. If you simply build test automation, it does not guarantee ROI. And that's, as we were doing the feud, that probably could have been one up there. That's a common myth that goes with automation. If you build it, it will be worth it. That's about as far away from the truth as you can get. You need to ask things like, did we automate the right thing? Did we do a proper evaluation ahead of time that the thing that we're about to automate should be automated? Here's one that I encounter all the time. Was it built correctly? Did the person have the right training? Did they have the right experience? I usually would want someone that had at least a couple years experience before I'd even begin to think about putting them on building some kind of framework. Many of these things can really tip the scale when it comes to test automation. I want to show you a graph, and I've got a handout for you. I'll kind of get them started going in both directions. I think there's enough for everybody here. And I really want you to have one of these so you can kind of have it up at the office and be reminded of these things. If you guys can kind of split them out over there, that would be great. Grab a quick drink here. I was first introduced to this concept by a manager at JCPenney, at Chinika knows as well. And he introduced this concept of the N-curve effect. I really love it. It was one of those really great nuggets he handed off to our team. And you've seen this before. The N-curve concept is basically this, that when you build a test case, when you're building a framework, really, when you think about it, to get to that very first test case being done is an enormous amount of effort. You have to climb this hill, and then you get the first test case done, and theoretically, as you keep going, this line is going to come down, and you begin to hit ROI somewhere out here, where it becomes more efficient to write the automation, it becomes easier, and it starts to pay off. The benefits are there. Now, recently, I enhanced this because I realized there's another N-curve that comes into play, and probably a good majority of us have been in this space, which is the maintenance side of it. And you'll notice that this line starts up a little bit higher here. That's because when I have to maintain something that I didn't build, I've got to figure out what was this guy thinking when he started it. I've got to kind of get my arms around his methodology. But when a framework is built well, you know what you'll find? You have to climb that curve again, but after a while it becomes familiar. You're like, oh yeah, I know how this guy does it. It's very straightforward, and I've seen this many, many times before. So here's another story. Once upon a time, there was another framework. It wasn't KRAD this time. So this framework, it seemed to break all the best practices. It stored all the automation resources on the local file system. Its code was stored in function libraries instead of reusable actions. It had endless Excel spreadsheets, that's kind of KRAD-like, and it reinvented the way the tool set was designed to be used. And it had a love affair with one command more than any, and it was the wait command. That's right. And wait is just one of those things that gets under my skin. It would be just kind of like, oh my goodness, I see this thing again. So I had encountered these ROI robbers again in this framework. And actually, it had been quite a long time, and this particular framework contained more of them than I'd ever seen and almost became the basis for this paper. All right, so in this world, there's a new line I had to draw here. I walked into Mark's office about 6 or 8 weeks ago, and I said, you know what? I've realized there's another type of ROI, or there's no ROI. There's another type of reality that fits on top of the N-curve. And it looks like this. Woo, woo, woo. It goes up and down. And that's what this framework looked like in order to maintain it. This was the reality of day in and day out of trying to keep it run. I've got 2 guys in here that have worked on it with me. And I'm wondering, how in the world does a framework get to the point where it has this problem? And I realized there's a couple basic fundamentals to it. We had someone with lack of proven experience, right? Here's something I've come to realize, and you all know this as well. Anybody can claim to be an automation engineer, even a senior automation engineer. It really takes good discernment and discretion from the hiring people to know, does this guy really know his chops or not? Is this person up to speed to actually building something? It isn't like we go to school somewhere and you get certified in this. You generally are hiring someone that just by them coming in and saying, I'm an automation engineer, and heaven forbid the QA manager doesn't have the experience to determine that, they might get the job. This framework was built in that space. And that title can go a long way. And also there was lack of reliable training. And here's one reality with this framework I'll go into in a minute, but there is so much on the web out there. Somebody just mentioned one of the sites out there in the few that we did. And it's one of the ones, I wish I could think of it now, but it's one of the ones that I always know if I see this website, I better be very careful because there's almost more bad news out there. There's more bad suggestions, bad practices than there are good. So you really have to be very careful where you get the experience of what you're building on, where you're getting your training. Anyway, out of this, we hit this thing I call the ROI roller coaster. And this is the reality we live in with two frameworks now we're having to maintain. And it just comes along with it. And we've worked very hard to try to get some slope on this. But every time we run into a new problem, and we've worked with this for almost a year, we still encounter new things. We're like, who would have ever guessed you could have written it like this? And yet here's another one of those like, wow, that's a very unusual way to pull it off. And off you go. I think we're hopefully starting to get this going down in this direction. We've implemented quite a few things to standardize the framework. We've got assets now moved into Quality Center and things like that. But it's always a surprise at every turn. And pretty much in most cases, all the best practices have been ignored. Grab a drink here. Just yesterday, as I was putting this presentation together, I was telling Mark, I was doodling on my notebook, and I said, why is this such a hard topic to talk on? It has a really broad swath of information to it. And I realized that there's quite a few areas that impact ROI with automation. You have the talent, the people you hire, that can have a big impact on it, the tools you buy, the training you give them, their ability to evaluate whether something should be automated or not, implementation, execution, and maintenance. Every single one of these categories has a potential cost if it's not done right. That's a lot of categories that you really have to keep in mind if you're going to walk into the automation world to know you've got a good bang for your buck at the end of the day. So let's go ahead. We're going to focus only on one today. We're going to talk just about the implementation side of things. I've got just 5 areas. I've come up with 16, but I'm going to show you 5 of them that we've identified, and I'm curious to see if any of these ring true with you. So the first one is one you've heard me talk about before. It's over abstraction. This shows up more than anything. As a matter of fact, most of the issues that you find with ROI robbers, you can trace back to some form of over abstraction. Over abstraction, it just means you've added more complexity to solving a problem that was necessary. And obviously this Rube Goldberg cartoon here shows a simple example of just getting sand out of your shoes, right? So that's a silly kind of one. He walks along, he finds a little crab in the sand, he flips it up in this bucket, it comes over here, it blows this bellows, it puts pressure in the boot, and the sand blows out of the back of the boot. So you can see how ridiculous that would be. But I would say my automation framework almost isn't that far from something like this. And it's remarkable to see it, but it is. So it breaks reason when you try to go and maintain it. You're like, could this possibly be a sand crab flipping up into a bucket that I'm looking at? Something that's very unusual. So back to the KRAD problem here. Remember, that's the one that our manager said, this is going to be the best thing since sliced bread. What went wrong with his strategy? Well, he took a data strategy, which was a data sheet concept, and he just went too much with it. He went crazy with it. He had 1 million data sheets. And at some point,
if you have too many spreadsheets, you've gone too far with it. It's a good thing as a check in your gut when you're working through your automation. If you find that you have 20 data sheets to drive a single framework, something's up. That's going to be hard to maintain in the long run. To add to the mix on top of that, tabs, which we all know you can add to an Excel spreadsheet, and you begin to see how complex this can get. Our framework is like that. I think it entails maybe 20 spreadsheets and maybe a dozen tabs in each one. You can imagine how complex that is to drive automation through one application. Other common abstractions, I'm definitely not a big fan of with statements. I almost hate them with a passion, but this framework is loaded with them. And it's a great example of implementing a command, one that's not used very often other than VB in our QTP or UFT tool set. It's hard to use. Another one is usage of environment variables, which we all need to use from time to time. And also hard-coded data buried into the automation. I find that the biggest problem with that is where are they located? When you have a framework that might have 50,000 lines of code, how often do you get to go through every line of code and look for these things? They're buried in there sometimes, real deep. And what are they related to, and how often would you need to update them? I'm going to cover that here in one more moment when I get into another one of the ROI robbers. So here's how you go ahead and resolve some of these things. Keep your data sheets down to one data sheet if possible, and no tabs. Do you know every framework I've built for almost the last, I'd say 10 years, I've been able to abide by that and get some really great frameworks out of it. It can be done, and it can make it easy to maintain. That's the real big piece of this, is the maintenance side of it. Use a programming syntax that's really common across languages. Watch out for those ones that come with your tool set that are obscure, that if you hired some guy off the street, he had no idea. What's a list statement? What does that do? Learn how to access common data. So here's one thing I've seen often where we'll take environment variables and we'll read all the data into it. And that's unnecessary to have all those variables that nobody knows about now. Find a better way to read your data sheet at the time you need it. And use that. It's more dynamic and I'll let you get to it when you need it. Don't hard code paths and file names and usernames, things like that. Overall, consider that some other guy has got to maintain this down the road. All right, our next ROI robber is object recognition. Object recognition is simply the process used by our automation to interact with the application. This is an example of the object repository, or OR as we often call it. It's the tool built into QTP and UFT and even WinRunner that is used to identify objects and store and come up with basically a methodology for referencing these within our code. By the way, there's a method also called descriptive programming that most languages provide as well. Now I want to show you an example. And I actually sent this to Paul, to a couple guys in this room when I found this. I found this about 8 weeks ago. I was maintaining a piece of code, and at the header was this gigantic block. And this is a way of reinventing the wheel within our framework. So what this little code does here is it takes what's in the object repository, it defines objects based upon those objects, and then it builds more objects based upon those objects. Since you already kind of get a gist of the problem here, not only that, the naming for these objects doesn't relate to this at all. So they've added another layer of abstraction to the problem by giving it a different name. So can you imagine if every day at work I come up and I have a different name you have to call me? That's basically what this programmer has done in developing this. They've come up with this different name than what the object itself is called, and they're reinventing the object repository. It was completely unnecessary, but I have a feeling I didn't know that. It's just a simple mistake that they didn't understand. Now, here's a really remarkable thing. I started to do some research. You know, we all use Google, right? Who said Google was a good source for? All right. So we're all Googling things from time to time. We're like, how am I going to solve this? Let's see what the world has to say, right? And I came across this website, and I thought, man, this is a sharp-looking website. And so I dug into it a little bit further, and I almost couldn't believe it. I found this example on that website. And I dug in a little further and realized that the developer for this framework must have learned how to write QTP code based upon this website. because it was almost they had cut and paste things right off of that site and just replaced it. And what drove home a really good point to me is even though this site looked official and looked real, it was actually teaching a really bad practice, a bad methodology. This wasn't something HP had put together. It was nice looking, granted, but it wasn't effective at all. You've got to watch out for those websites. I reached out to Avnet is the company we buy our licensing of HP products from. And at the very end of this presentation, I've got a contact for you if any of you are interested. And I said, Mark, if somebody just wanted to get the HP training, how much does it cost? Now, I was very fortunate to go to the HP training. When I worked for JCPenney, they allocated funds for 3 of us to go to training, and that made a big difference when I got to train people like Tanika and others in our team. At least I had a foundation concept of how is this tool intended to be used. I always use this term, use a tool as designed, not as discovered. If you're using a tool as discovered, you pretty much are stepping off just like this. I guess this is the right way to go, and you begin to build all of that framework in that space. If you use it as designed, you know at least you're heading in the general right direction. And most tools you can find legitimate, great sources. In our case, with the HP tool set, HP made sense to go to. And can you believe that that training is about $3,500 bucks? I don't know about you, but that's pretty cheap. Now, if I had to pay it out of my own pocket, that's a lot of money. But for a company that's about to say, hey, for the next, I don't know how many years you're going to work for me and you're going to build automation code, that's pretty darn cheap. That you now have someone stepping off in the right direction instead of spending months, fiddling with code that wasn't built with the right methodologies, using crazy stuff like this. Okay? All right, so a simple object recognition approach. Believe it or not, this is the same exact type of code you would use that replaces this nonsense, and this directly uses the object repository. It looks simpler. It is simpler. This is a direct approach to using it, and it's the way the tool was designed to be used. It's very simple. And this is just using their sample application that comes out of the box. You also need to know when to use descriptive programming. And I'll have to be honest, I have fallen into this trap myself. So most of us, when we get into the world of automation, we learn how to use the object repository or that concept first. Then we learn about this cool thing called descriptive programming, which is just a programmatic way of replicating the object repository. And it makes you look really smart, and it's really cool. And in the end, if you've got that stuff spread all over the place, it's going to be a big pain to maintain. I'll just be upfront with you. You've got to have discernment when to go with descriptive programming and when not to. And my rule of thumb is if it's dynamic and it's changing, descriptive makes sense. But if it isn't dynamic and changing, you've got to use that object repository. You've got to centralize the way that object components are stored. It'll help you in the maintenance in the long run. Our third one is related to synchronization. Synchronization is really all about making sure before I continue on with the automation, it's ready for me to do something. So I'm looking for things like, don't go here. Synchronization is like, did the page finish loading? Is an object active? If I'm looking at a web page, did it, was it dimmed out? Now it's active. Sometimes I'll have a dialog box that'll come up and it'll say loading, and that'll go away, and I'll know once that thing is gone, it's indicating to the human user that it's ready to perform the next, the human is ready to perform the next operation. So why not allow my automation to monitor those things? Unfortunately, this is the method most young engineers use for synchronization. They use the wait statement. Another one of my little terms I say is wait is like hope when it comes to test automation. It's literally it seems long enough, and then I'll go ahead. Can you imagine if you decided to drive your car like this? Okay, I'm driving around, most traffic lights, 30 seconds. Okay, accelerate, right? I'm going to get T-boned, right? So if you use the wait statement for synchronization in your automation, it's really just blindly saying, that's probably long enough. And it's definitely something that will get you in trouble. And you know what the telltale sign of this is? Scripts that run some days and they don't run others. If you have that intermittentness, I'll bet you anything you're going to find these sprinkled all over the place. Or whatever code tool you're using, it's method of it. There are times to use wait when you deliberately want a 1-second delay, maybe after clicking a button that you know has some latency to it or something like that. That's fine. I have to use it from time to time. But when you begin to use it as your form of synchronization for automation, you're asking for trouble. The proper way to do synchronization is with exist statements, other things that can look for a state of an object. This is just one method. You've got to know what kind of things to monitor. Things like I said, if a dialog box comes up and it says, I'm loading data, and then it goes away, you can do that. I've even written functions that will monitor things that show up. Some applications have this ability they'll come up and they'll let you know something's happening and then they go away. And build yourself a function in your core library or in your application library that just is smart enough to look for those sort of things. And only use weights when you really need to. But use them sparingly. All right, our fourth item is in the area of data strategy. Again, a data strategy, it has to be done well. It really is the way we organize the data that we're going to use in our automation framework. It's something you want to put some time into thinking about so that you don't want to have to adapt it. One thing I found with a data strategy, when you find a really great one, it tends to adapt well to growth, and you're not having to add on a lot of other stuff to it. It evolves well. Oh, is that you over there? Okay. Well, I hope whoever it's for, they find. So another story. The story continues. I was telling you about that framework that I was introduced to a couple years ago in our company. Same developer. And they had tied the test data to a tab within an Excel spreadsheet. And remarkably enough, I couldn't figure out how in the world do they know what data sheet to pull from? How are they pulling the data in to drive this test? It took quite a bit of digging in. And then I realized they had used a method I'd never seen in my life before, which was they determined what is my file name. Okay, my file name is abracadabra. And once it was able to derive that and put that in a variable, it said, go find the abracadabra tab. And that's where my data will be found. You can imagine how brittle this made the framework. Because if I ever renamed the file name without knowing this, the whole test stops running. There was no clear documentation. That's the way it was set up at all. But again, this was just a technique that had been figured out. I'm probably on that website as well, but this was a clever way to do it. Another really amazing thing is, how many of you know what's the maximum number of characters you can put in an Excel tab? Do you think it has a limit? That was close. It's 31. Okay, imagine this. You've now tied your data strategy to tabs in a spreadsheet, right? The naming of your test case and the tab name have to be identical. What happens to the name of the test case now? What's the maximum the test case can be called? 31 characters. We've now put our arm behind our back because of the limitation Excel had in it. Does that make sense why that's such a bad strategy to use? That should have been a red flag right there. When you find that there's some secondary technology that's interfering and potentially making your automation strategy less scalable in the long run, you've got trouble on your hands. And that's exactly what we had. So anytime you were to rename that tab or you rename that script, you're going to have trouble, or maybe the test case name needs to evolve a little bit, you're going to break the script. It had this cascading effect through the entire framework. So back to KRAD, we had problems of too complex data strategy. It was over abstract, and it was hard to maintain. Those are common things that happen when the data strategy hasn't been thought out well. And it can seem logical. I've been in this space where you think this is such a really smart thing, and then you have to step back from it for a moment and say, I won't be the guy that maintains this. That's important to consider. It's going to be someone else that doesn't have that experience. Could they figure this out? And you need to step back from your data strategy and consider that. Does it make sense? Data sheet troubles, they'll catch up eventually. You'll have endless spreadsheets and endless tabs. If you see that, you've got a red flag on your hands. You've got to simplify the data strategy. My preference is one row to one test. I actually just threw this in this morning because I wanted to show you an example. Here's an example of one row per one test. This is a data sheet. This is one test. This is one test, and this is one test. And this is a methodology I've kind of built over the years. I first think I started working on it in pennies. I refined it more in Fossil and even more now at Argo. And I realized I could put pipes in here to make segmentations of where data came into play. And so what I generally do is set up data like this, and everywhere you see a pipe, you just transition to another screen. And it's as simple as that. And a lot of people say, well, this is going to go on forever. And they can go on for a long way. And I've never found it to be difficult to maintain, ironically. Because I started to add another column up here. You'll notice I have a test action column here. And when my scripts go through and pull up its data, it looks at what it says here. And it says skip, it ignores this complete row. So when I'm able to have metadata like that, I'm able to do things like, let's just make this row here all about information about the data below it. You'll also notice there's no spaces in my data strategy, because guess what the variable names are called? They're called exactly the same thing. It's one-to-one. It makes it easier to read it. So the data strategy had a direct impact on the design, and it didn't happen right off the bat. This evolved over time, but I wanted to show you an example of one that you could consider. And this works out really good, and I've used this for quite a long time now. All right, we've got one more. I want to talk about scalability. This is all about, will your automation effort grow over time? Does it have the ability to grow and adapt as you begin to have more tests to do, the application evolves, and that sort of thing? You need to plan right from that start, right from the very beginning, that you want this to grow. Don't get stuck in the idea of, I can just get this test case to execute. Think about that bigger picture. Sometimes you need to do an evaluation where you do need to go through that process of just getting it to execute. But don't let that drive the development of the overall framework. Once you got that figured out, step back and say, now how am I going to make this so it will scale in the long run? Yeah, I might be asked to do 12 test cases right now, but can it do 100? Can it do 200? Can it go across this application framework well? So the two frameworks I'm dealing with right now had a very similar problem to both of them. And I wonder if you are encountering the same thing. These frameworks were tied to run on one machine only, a specific machine, probably the person that developed it. They were tied to run under one software build. Their methodology was, I'll keep cloning the code and evolve and maintain different variations of it. You can see how that got to be really trouble after a while. They were tied to only one user that could run it. And probably the worst scenario of them all is they can only be run once at a time. So you couldn't have concurrent automation running at the same time. And both of them had that. And that told me something, that the two developers probably were trading notes because they both had it. Now, one benefit of it is we used the same approach to fix both of them. And we now can actually run those frameworks simultaneously with multiple users on multiple environments all at the same time. And once we figured it out on one, we were able to implement it. And believe it or not, that just took probably a day or so to really think about how we were going to resolve it. They were this close from really changing the way they had designed it, but they had kind of locked themselves in a box by putting a bunch of stuff on the local file system. So you wind up with scalability problems when you don't really think about the foundation. When it's poor, it's going to introduce its own scaling problems. Most automation winds up here. It can't scale, and then it turns into just, oh yeah, we wrote that a long time ago, and we don't use it anymore. And I remember we had stuff like that at Kinko's when we were doing it. We tried to do some things, and it just wouldn't scale right. We didn't learn. I didn't have that training at that time. Later on, I got it. And it's unfortunate when you see it out there and you know you spent all that time on it. It's really hard to retrofit scalability into a framework. So you want to do it up front. So the common indicators to look for: hard-coded paths, file names, and user credentials. If you see that stuff embedded in your code, you got trouble on your hands. You're going to have scalability issues when you begin to want to replicate that out and run multiple users through it. Dependencies on the local file system. Remember I told you about that website that I saw that introduced that practice of reinventing the object repository? Do you know, even though we owned ALM, that person didn't know that they could store resources in it. So they had them all on the local file system, again, making our framework very brittle. And another thing to look for is they say, oh, I'll run it on my machine. It only runs on my machine. Again, another telltale sign. You probably got a framework that's not going to scale real well. It's going to have trouble with that. So here's some ways to go ahead and resolve that if you find it. Make sure you store all your test assets and things in your in your test management tool. Go ahead and make sure it's scalable. It should be able to be run simultaneously in multiple environments with variables that you would store in a data sheet generally, including URLs, user data, user IDs, and data. Those sort of things should be in your data sheet, not embedded in your code. Even if you've got one script you're going to run, go ahead and put it in the data sheet, make it dependent upon it. In the long run, if you need to scale it, you'll thank yourself. It's going to make it a lot easier to scale. And you're going to get the ROI out of it. So here's the list of the 16 that I've got so far. And this is on that graph there at the bottom. A little different format, but they're all there. And I swear I keep finding new ones daily that I add to the list. I've actually got a white paper I've written on each one of these, how to find them and how to fix them when you find them in your framework. And so hopefully not too far down the road, you'll get a chance to get your hands on that as well. I want to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions on these or the things I've presented, feel free to ask. Go ahead, Paul. Oh, here's a mic. We've got a couple microphones.
Hello? Okay. Can you go back to your CSV exam, that one?
This one here?
Yeah. So you've got your individual test cases there, right?
Yes.
So the test cases run, I guess the question is, where's your different environment specified here? So I want to run on A versus B versus C, but the same test case.
That's a good point. So I trimmed down a bunch of things off this spreadsheet to fit it in here.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually a column over here just for that. It was actually for country at that point in time.
Okay, so if we use that as an example, then would you have test case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the U.S., test case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the UK, and et cetera, et cetera. So you would have a bunch of repeated, quote, things, but the data is different per environment, where here environment is a country?
You could, and what I've done in that case is this might just be the U.S. data sheet,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll have a data sheet for France and so on and so forth.
Okay, so you add your third dimension by adding different data sheets.
Yeah, if I
Okay.
knew I was going to do, in that case, that's exactly what we had at Fossil. We had a point of sale that ran in 30 different languages. And so because there were so many test cases, I wanted to, just for organization purposes, making a second one just for all France and all of Germany and whatever. But there's no reason this couldn't have driven it. The single framework was capable of doing it. It was because I wanted to get concurrent execution out of it, which is why I did it that way. Yeah. So this concept, you can continue to add columns. I slimmed this down, obviously, to fit on this spreadsheet. I'd love for some of you to consider this concept. I have continually found it to be really beneficial, and especially when all my data can live here. Now, I'll tell you, the first time I encountered this was in a point of sale at Penny's, and the method that particular engineer used was he had data here, and if there was secondary similar data, like let's say I wanted to add items to a cart, he wound up adding it, going down to the next row to do it. In the long run, I found it was easier to just add another column called item 1, 2, and 3, because in most cases I wasn't, from an automated perspective, going to add 100 items to the cart. A manual tester was going to test that. I was going to add 4 or 5 things, and by adding the columns and sticking them on a row, I found it was easier to maintain that way. It was more abstract with that secondary row. Anything else on that one?
No, I was just looking to see how you handle the multiple dimensions there. What we're doing is, for anything that's two-dimension, we look at CSV files and spreadsheets. For anything that goes to the third dimension, we're going JSON, just because it can handle arbitrarily many dimensions at that point.
Excellent. Yep. If anybody's interested in having a sample of this, feel free to write me, and I'll send you the sample piece of this so you can build on it if you want. All right, let's go back over to here. What other questions might you have? Get a microphone over here.
Some of the features that you described are mostly QTP dependent, object repository, or others. But the moment you try to go to a different tool or switch, you don't have that luxury of having object repository. I think you should have your developers get used to what is object repository means. Let's not record and playback an object repository and say all the properties, but you should know what is that property all about. Like, for example, if we are using Selenium or something, there is no object repository as a concept there.
Sure.
You should understand what is the property, how is my website built, or application is built.
Sure.
So how do you do, like, I know you're talking about object repository, not using customized objects, etc. So how do you train your staff overall for different tools and stuff?
For different tools that don't have an object repository
Yeah.
concept?
Yeah.
That's a good one. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I've really thought about it. If I had to, let's say I decided I was going to learn Selenium. Actually, Jeff explained a little bit of this to me, that Selenium has a similar concept of descriptive, I think, right, in its usage. So I would probably look for a method. Again, I would hate to put a whole lot of descriptive programming in there. So I would be more inclined to find some centralized concept like the object repository does for my object identification. Maybe even from a troubleshooting perspective, it could come in real handy. But that's just my kind of gut feeling of what I would probably do. I haven't had experience with that particular piece of it. I think it's critical when it comes to the object repository. People need to have an understanding. When you're working on an application, we brought this up earlier, you want to have an understanding of the technology you're on. If you're working on a web application and you're a QA engineer in this room right now, you should have a little bit of experience with HTML. I'm just saying. It's the basics, right? It's not unreasonable to know, because when it comes to automating something, those values behind the scenes are going to make sense to you if you understand what a web table is, or a div tag, or why things are set up the way they are. It's not that hard of a language to learn. If you're a mobile engineer, you should understand the basics of the operating system. You should know that your iPhone runs on a variant of Unix. If you're working on a Windows phone, you should know what they are. Those things matter when it comes to automating these sort of things. It gives you a sense of how to do them well. Do you have another one?
No, I guess that.
Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sure.
I was just going to say, we use concepts such as a page object model with Selenium. So you just basically model your pages and create a library of objects that way in whatever language you
So
want.
it's a similar concept. Do you do it page by page, or is it an entire library of all of these formulas essentially define the object?
Typically, you would just model the pages so that then you can go into even an abstraction on top of that where you can do business descriptives.
So you have one page object per page, is that right? If you switch to one web page versus the next page, would you do a similar one for that page?
There would be shared object libraries for objects that appear across pages, like in headers and footers and such.
I got you. Okay. So that starts to head into that space of the OR, of the object repository. And what's the advantage of the object repository? It centrally manages how you identify objects, right? That's what it does. In a way, it's a form of abstraction. So you hear me, bagging on abstraction. Some of it's required. All we have to do is write a function, and we've added abstraction, but it's the right abstraction to add, right? There are times when you have to add these things. And centralizing the way you're managing objects is a good use of abstraction. What you don't want to do is, in that example, where they had the object repository and then they reinvented it down the road, where they read those objects into another objects and then renamed them over and over again. That's a misusage of it. So if you're going to come up with an object management strategy, make sure it's a good solid one where that one strategy works across the whole framework. And I would encourage you not to break it up in a million pieces per page. That one strategy should be good. And I wouldn't be surprised that you would even come up with a tool on how you build it so that you can debug it. Usually when I'm building out a good object strategy, that's one of the first pieces I work on. I'm not writing code necessarily in my object strategy side by side. I'll go ahead and build out my object repository for those screens. Usually I do it this way. I record a movie of it. I come up with a naming convention ahead of time of what I'm going to call each object. I'll build out the object repository where it's nice and solid. I'm using things like the highlight feature so I can say, yeah, this thing, it's reliably finding it. I generally limit it to 3 properties to identify an object. I never use smart identification. I wish they would remove it from the tool altogether if any of you are using QTP. And things like that. So there's like almost a whole science just to object recognition to make it reliable. If that is not solid, you're going to find an automation that's going to run very unreliable. I can guarantee it. What other questions? All right. Anybody else? So here's my contact information. If you want, I think the deck might be available. And for any of you that are interested in reaching out to someone about training HP, I asked our rep if we could pass this information on, and his name is Mark Smith. He actually just left HP, and he's working for Avnet now. He's a real nice guy. and write his information down. I told him we would be maybe sending a person or two his way, and he can give you the details of what the course names are called and how much they are and where to go and take these courses. It would be well worth it. If you're serious about automation and you're working on the HP tool set, this is going to be a call worth making. I'm not getting anything for saying that. I really believe it. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Take about 5 minutes, and we'll have Tim Lyon come up next. Okay, everyone ready for the last presentation? I got a couple more quotes to live by. My software never has bugs. It just develops random features. Have you heard that one before? Unintended? Okay, don't get mad at me for this. Women are like internet domains. The ones I like are already taken. I thought that was good. Windows has detected you do not have a keyboard. Press F9 to continue. Pick the last one here. A life. Cool. Where can I download one of those? All right, is Tim ready? Oh, okay. Command performance.
People hear me? No? You hear me enough at work already, right? All right, I'm going to delay a couple minutes just to give a couple of people a chance to show up. Question and answer period. How was the presentation? Great, done, thanks. I do want to say, though, thank you, Todd, and all Systemware for having us out again. This is a great event. We get to do it 3 times a year, roughly once a quarter, skip the summer. Started a long time ago with Mark Benson reaching out to me when I was at GameStop. He was at FedEx Services and just saying, hey, why don't we meet and kind of show you how we do stuff, and you can show us how you do stuff, and we kind of do a mind meld out of the whole thing. And we went out to his location, gosh, about 3 years ago now. I'm trying to think how long ago that was. Yeah, spent a half day, Moss, myself, and I think Paul, the 3 of us might have been out there, kind of see how they operated, showed us how things worked. That was pretty cool. Systemware actually ended up, I think, providing lunch that day. And basically, we talked about coming back out to our place, and we were at GameStop at that time. Things didn't work out, location/room and all that stuff. And finally, Systemware said, hey, we'll sponsor it. You guys can come out and do a knowledge share at our place. And lo and behold, it's been, I don't know, 3 years or whatever now, and we've had this thing going. It's grown. We got a lot of new companies and participants. Need more speakers. You know, people can talk. It doesn't have to be the same guys like me and Paul and Moss and stuff. So if you got topics you want to discuss, bring up. It is a learning experience. We want it to be that for people. So please, if you got ideas, discussion points you'd like to do, or even if you contradict something I'm saying or somebody else is saying, bring up counterpoints. It's one of those things. It doesn't have to be groupthink either with some of the stuff. We have different processes and policies in place at different locations. Some are more waterfallish, some are more agile scrumish. So there's different perspectives, and people have moved around in different parts of the organization. You heard Greg talk about Chinika, who works for me and my automation group before, that she worked with him in the past, and I think some of the other guys at FedEx and things of that nature. So there's been some cross-pollination of groups around here. So please, if you've got ideas or topics you'd like to bring them up, and we'll be more than happy to see it here and see you up here presenting. Pick on him. All right. I'm not going to wait any longer just to get going, since I know people want to get out of here soon. Vision Quest, the rite of passage for executing upon delivery. Sounds really cool and exciting, I know. I am going to apologize up front. I whipped this together pretty much last night out of concept I had several weeks ago when we talked about this. So I don't have quite it rehearsed as well as I probably should to be doing this. So you'll have to go along with my flubs and my uhs and ahs and all that good stuff. But hopefully it's relatively entertaining. It is going to be some audience participation, though. So at points in time, I ask the audience to speak out and provide some input. It's not going to be a heavy use of that, but just be prepared. So I'm not standing up like, come on. But we'll get going. All right. Wikipedia definition. A vision quest is a rite of passage in some Native American cultures. The ceremony of the vision quest is one of the most universal and ancient means to find spiritual guidance and purpose. Okay, I'm not a big man about reading slides, but some of the stuff definition-wise I will. But basically, if you don't know what a vision quest is from Indian culture, American Indian culture and such, it's basically, like it's saying there, somebody's going up, finding their life's purpose is basically what it comes down to. And it's some of the trials and tribulations they go through as trying to figure that out. Of course, this is my definition from when I grew up. This is where, basically 1985, which by the way was not the year I graduated, so don't read too much into the math there. I had, of course, to play this just to make it apply to the people that might have watched this movie back in the day. But it was coming of age movie of a teenager, Loudon Swain, played by Matthew Modine, and basically he wants to be the best wrestler in the state, but unfortunately he's too big to go against the top wrestler in the state, so he has to drop 2 weight classes to do it, which if you know anything about wrestling, that's not an easy thing to do, to drop that much weight. And in order to do that, he had some, bodily functional issues and things he had to deal with while trying to lose that weight, as well as chasing the girl. And meanwhile, his friends are telling him, don't do it, you can win your own weight class, no problem. Why are you going to try and go against the best, blah, blah, blah. But that was his vision quest. He wanted to be the best. He felt he had to beat the best to do it, and that's the whole story of the movie. It's actually a fairly entertaining movie. The soundtrack's probably better than the movie, in my opinion, but it's good. All right, my presentation definition. You can read it here easily, but the challenges, going pains, and actions to take to attempt to deliver better quality, more useful software that protects the customers from themselves and their blankety-blank coworkers. If you know most issues and things that come up in real-life world examples, it's usually somebody did something stupid or something they shouldn't have done or something the software allowed them to do that it shouldn't have allowed them to do. And sometimes it's never you, it's like Chris would say, some friend that made a mistake and causes some of the problems. So this is just going through some of the process that can hopefully help people avoid this. All right, step 1, focus on quality. Who here likes to focus on quality? Anybody? Anybody? All right, great. Not my whole team, what? Jeez. Basically, there's nothing rocket science here. Just going over the basics. Not on the tools, but on the people and processes for quality. And Chris touched on this earlier. It's really not about the tools. It's about the people and processes to get quality in place. Now, my team would probably say, yeah, right, Tim, after I slammed TFS down their throats for the past year. But it's really not the tool that's the thing. It's the people and processes. And most of the tools are to support that. And to Chris's point earlier, if you have a tool or automation to implement a bad process or an ineffective process, you're just going to make it worse faster. So the big thing is to make sure you have your processes and people in place to do things effectively. You want to leverage the knowledge of business process and goals to better understand how the software will be utilized. Basically, this comes down to interviewing your POs, product owners, business users, understanding how they actually use the software. This might be through product owner proxies, BAs, other people, but really find out how to use it. The problem we sometimes get in the QA world, at least from my own perspective in the past, and I'm not as much hands-on anymore, to be honest, but you get locked in on that screen or thing, web page, or whatever you're testing, and that is your world. And you're testing, okay, this new feature requirement ABC, check, 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 tested that, test that. And you kind of lose a bit of the perspective of how the whole thing's intended to be used and what business problem it's trying to solve. Now, it's not asking everybody to be a business analyst and understand every single feature and function, but sometimes you've got to take a step back and look at what's actually trying to be solved to make sure you're testing it effectively and coming up with more of the system validation tests that are necessary to do that. Also understand the customer and different user perspectives of each type of customer. Now, most applications we have different layers of access or authorization of some shape or form. You might be a viewer if you're this type of person that doesn't have authority to do anything. You might be an editor in this particular one. You might see that process of payments if you have this authority. You might be an administrator if you set up user accounts. All these are different paths and access levels to the application. Now, a lot of times you can do your testing like, okay, I'm going to do this person's screen. Okay, I'm going to do this person's screen, and do this person's screen, and go through that same screen and all the different 5 to 7 rules that might be applied. I'm not saying it's a bad way of doing things, but sometimes you also got to kind of take it a step back and make sure you're going through it from the full user perspective. So if I'm an admin, okay, how do I go through the site or system as an admin doing something from a day-to-day business function? So you go through the whole role, because sometimes you can get into that fact that everything functionally works, but it just doesn't connect the dots right when you start going through a way a real user would at points in time. So it's just kind of make sure you take that analysis and say, hey, am I actually going through it how a real user would at points in time? And that's when you do it from those various different roles. Last piece there is ensure the developed software meets the desired needs of the customer and business. Really shouldn't have to state that, but it's one of those things, just make sure it's a given for everybody, is, again, it's solving some type of business need, it's solving some purpose. If it's not solving some business purpose, they're not going to use it, it's going to sit on the shelf, or they can complain about it, and basically cause it to be trash as far as they're concerned, or rework to be done. Or they'll go to somebody else to build it instead. All right, now let's go to step 2, which is totally contradictory to what I just talked about. We don't focus on quality. Okay, now you're saying, okay, what's this idiot talking about now? Well, when you focus on quality, again, you're focusing. Well, this particular presentation came about because of this one show I saw. What brought us here? Actually, what brought me here, and in turn, you're here with me now. Show Brain Games. I don't know, has anybody ever watched this show? My kids love it, and I love watching it with them because there's all sorts of brain teasers / figure out how your brain works or doesn't work. But season 2, episode 1, there was one called Focus Pocus, and I really like that one, and that's what got me thinking about QA. Because part of the thing is, it's about your field of vision. What is reality? What do you see? What do you perceive? If you focus, you have basically kind of almost a situational awareness blindness. So you only are focusing in that particular area, you kind of miss the stuff around you. So how you change your focus will change your perception of what is reality. Well, and that got me thinking about QA and just what we were talking about a moment ago. You're focusing on this particular aspect, you can kind of miss what's going on around you if you're not careful. And basically, there's this other document I read. I'm a nerd, geek. Actually, my kids will say I'm a part-time geek, full-time nerd. But that show got me looking into some other research, and this one was Decision Without Blinders. It's by the Harvard Business Review. Particularly, gentleman, I don't have his name up there, but you can read it if you like. But it goes over some of these things that really seem to hit home for me as far as how it affects QA or how your focus affects QA. Again, the standard forest in the trees. Okay, you focus on the tree, you don't see the forest around you. So you overlook what you're not expecting. Again, you're testing thing. Okay, this field got added with this new password generator, blah blah blah. I'm testing that. Meanwhile, the header's been totally jacked up, or some new thing got inserted there that's not supposed to be there. But you're focused on this, and so that's what you're testing, and you kind of miss what's going on the outside. Gradual change goes unnoticed. Anybody with young kids can relate to this. They change every single day. They're growing every single day. But to you, do they really change the day-to-day? No, but you look at a picture a year ago, and like, geez, you got facial hair now? And you just don't notice it. And that's how some of the things that happens with app development over time. Again, this is not saying maliciously on purpose type things, but some things start to creep in. And then after a while, you kind of start seeing it there, and then you're kind of like start assuming it's always been there, and so it must be okay. And again, that's usually not a huge drastic issue, unless it's like someone's social security number posted up there or PHI information for us medical folks. But it's one of those things to keep your eyes aware of as you're going through things. Next piece is the audience participation part, okay? This is where I want you guys to give me some feedback, okay? This is test on seeing information. Count the number of F's in the sentence below. You guys can count them out loud. Tell me. How many are there? Anyone? Noonan? Bueller? What you got? 5, 4, 6. There are 6. Okay. Part of the thing is, you got the Iron Man face palm to go with it. Our brain kind of discards the of. It doesn't have any meaning to us as far as being any relevance or importance, so we kind of don't see it when we're scanning the information. Now, you're a little prepped for this one because I told you we were seeing, so you might have spent a little bit more time and diligence doing it. In your day-to-day activity and such, you miss some things like that because your focus isn't there or you're not looking at it from a wide enough perspective to see it. And that can happen with, again, testing applications and things of that nature. All right, one more try. This is a different test. Do people see where the issue is? I had to read it twice, even though I knew it was a joke coming, at the time. I was like, okay, what did I miss? I'm like, oh, there we go. And the whole thing there is a you. Your brain discards the second you, because guess what? It's adding no value. So it just gets rid of it. And this is kind of when you're proofreading your own stuff. And if it weren't for Word and its magical duplicate word type function, I don't know how many of these emails and documents I'd have sent out with duplicate words, just because it's just one of those things your brain skips. All right, so how do we address this? When we're addressing seeing information issues, we want to have outside views from other resources generally best. This kind of goes back to the age-old thing of, a developer writes his code, they're usually not the best one to view it from an objective standpoint of testing it. Just because they're the ones most familiar with it, that's what they're doing. Same also goes with if you're the same person testing it over and over and over again. You start getting blindness to what's actually happening with the app. I don't know how many times it's happened in my past where I was testing something, I was the guy testing this particular feature, and yes, I was going through it, blah, blah, blah. I guess I was bringing a contract the next day, and they're like, oh, did you see this? Oh, wait, no, I didn't. Because I've been going through it so many times, I got such blindness to that type of situation. So this is where you want to make sure you try to use other resources, whether it's a QA lead, another QA person, a different developer, somebody, at times to kind of double check your work, especially if you're working on it over and over and over again. All right, one of the other things we talked about was failure to seek information. Get your proverbial blinders on. We tend to get limited to the data we already have. What's true today or what's true in the past must be true from this point forward. And we tend to find data that meets what we're expecting. And this, of course, gets most worrisome when decision makers are basing it on data that they're used to having versus finding the most relevant data. Prime examples are some of the things with like the old space shuttle disasters and things of that nature where they're expecting not to find any issues with the O-rings and temperature drop and stuff because they looked at data for previous launches of the temperature being low and they thought, hey, that worked fine, great. They never tested it when it was that low of a temperature of that day and the O-rings were exposed more than they were in the past. But they made some assumptions based on old data and guess what? Disaster happened. Now, granted, most of our things probably aren't going to be that type of a disaster, but if you're in any type of life-threatening / life-saving equipment, that could be. But the thing is, too, is just to make sure we seek out the relevant information instead of just always depending on what we have immediately available. Of course, get some data analysis, paralysis, how much you dig, that's a separate topic. But it is one of those things we should be conscious of how we look at our data that we're using to justify any type of action or decision we make. All right, here's another test. Legacy system has known 3-digit valid numeric sequence of 246 being acceptable to the unknown business rule. Never had an application that you didn't know the business rules or didn't have a source code to, right? But you know 246 is acceptable. How would you derive what business rule is valid? By using another 3-number sequence. And you can do it over and over again, but you can only tell me what the actual business rule is once. So what are some test cases people would throw out sequence-wise to try and provide what theory they have behind what the business rule is? So what digits would you give me? I'll give you a pass-fail based on the digits you give me. 247 pass. Fail. Pass. Fail. Evil. Pass. Pass. Fail. Pass. What was the other one? Pass. Anybody got the business rule in place right now? What's that? Very good. It's an ascending number sequence, any ascending number sequence. But most people start off this way, is going with, oh, I'll add 2 again, or well, it's an even number, and they'll go with 248. Or they'll double it and go 1224. But those are all confirming test to a sequence that's already known. You could never derive the business rule by using confirming tests. Never. The point of the thing is, the only way to derive the business rule is by using negative tests, that's failures. And sometimes I think we as QA people get so focused on verifying the data that we ignore contradictory information. So this is what I was just talking about. You have to use contradictory information to confirm your business rule is in effect executing properly. One of the things is to say any type of data you get, and this article I was covering down here is targeted to executives and decision making, but again, when I was reading it, it seemed like a lot of it actually applied from the QA analysis perspective. But it's like you have to make sure you check the negative to make sure the positive is actually being enforced properly. And again, that's where sometimes I think we lack on the testing factor is we stick to, oh, I got to verify this works, verify this works, verify this works, and you keep doing positive, positive, positive. Oh, I did this one negative test and it's fine. Might work several times because they're all passing, but it's one of those things that you're really validating the business rule or not. See here it says use the devil's inquisitor's rule. Pretty much everybody knows what a devil's advocate is. They're attacking the situation. They're playing the antagonist. They're being the counterpoint. The devil's inquisitor is more of not being negative, but just why? Why is this a valid number? Why can't I use this number? That's where it gets into not just the why, but ask why not. Oh, this is acceptable. Why not this one? And using that negative aspect to kind of fully flush out some of your test cases. All right, next piece is failure to use information. People that were at NetAsset's Agile Training Day will recognize this graphic. I liked it because it's very relevant. You got a guy with wheels telling these people dragging a cart with square wheels, here you go, and they're like, no thanks, we are too busy. I kind of come up with whenever I hear anything stupid, I say, you're square wheeling me, Smalls. But, you know, it's something that you got to look at. It's like, okay, even though I rush, do we need to really take a step back and say, hey, will this really help me to work more effectively or more thoroughly? But this is the one phrase you'll hear a lot, but this is how we've always done it. I'm sure nobody's ever heard that in your particular company or place of work. This is what's always worked. This is how it's been done. You know, why do we need to change it? This is what I'm most comfortable with. I can do this blindfolded. Why should I change? Well, you're still doing square wheels. You might be able to do it as fast as possible with your square wheels, but you know, if you take a moment to change the tires and figure out how to use this new wheel tool, round wheel tool, you might be 10 times, 100 times more effective. But you're going to have to slow down to do it because you got to pull over the car to the side of the road, take the 15 minutes to half an hour, day maybe with the tools back then, to change the tire and get yourself rolling again. And that's where sometimes I think we get caught up into, especially if you're in an agile environment, we have 2-week sprints and you got to produce, that people are afraid to take that step back and actually look to better act and solve the problems ahead of them and be more proactive with it. And this part here is really more towards your leadership, but I think it can be useful for QA about not using information about your competitors. One thing is, you know, if you kind of know who your competition is or what tools are out there that's competing with yours or whatever solution you're providing, you'll be surprised what stuff comes out in the market at some points in time. About particular security failures, things that are exposed that shouldn't be, or even in the industry, if they're not direct competitors, you keep some analysis. Those can be like one of those, oh, I should take a look at this, make sure we don't have that same problem, or do we have this covered? So it's always something I try to tell people, keep your eye on the industry or the field you're working in so you can kind of have that double check, so if hopefully somebody screws up before you do, which hopefully nobody does here, but it's always something to have a good perspective on it. All right, address use information issues. It's kind of a wordy statement, but address problematic mindset of assuming it works and job is not to verify and prove the system works, but rather whether it's robust enough to succeed for its end user. This gets back to people getting told, hey, your job is to verify this works. Chelsea, I brought you in. You're my contractor. I need you to verify this software works before we launch it tomorrow, okay? So the verify thing is already setting the mindset, I've got to prove this still works. So in order to prove this still works, I'm going to use all the positive test cases to make sure it meets the business requirements they said it's done. And my job is to make it so it ships versus trying to look at it from the aspect of, is it robust enough to survive in the field? That is, the dumb user inputs, defective user manipulations, the ID10T errors, those type of things, is where you get more of the negative tests and things of that nature. That gets into this part. Encourage attempts at breaking the system. Instead of, hey, you got to verify this works. Hey, can you make sure this works in the field no matter who's using it? Or at least so my grandma can still use it, Yeah. And you try to get that feedback, because sometimes you get, especially, QA managers, directors, VPs, whoever, can get in that mindset too when they're given direction. It's like, hey, I need you to verify this. It's a quick regression set. It's just a production validation. Just make sure it all works. Okay. So we got to be watchful of ourselves with how we talk and communicate to people of what expectations we're setting and what perspective we're providing. Other piece there is report and track issues through resolution. This is kind of stating some of the obvious that, hey, if you encounter something, track it. Some Agile teams will say, well, geez, we fix bugs like we encounter them. Well, great, that's good. That usually means it hasn't got to production yet. But if you have things, you should track it so you can make sure you know what's being resolved or not, as well as how effective some of the testing is being at points in time. And again, this gets back to the marketplace. Understand releases and updates of competitor space so you know what they're doing, how often they're reading. One of the things I used to do quite frequently when I was at Match.com several years ago, I had eHarmony, a bunch of other places. I knew when they released their stuff every day because I had monitors set up on it. And the first thing I do is see what issues they have. I have my own automation scripts go out, check a few things just to see if they had anything exposed, and I see the new features they'd have done. I'm sure they had some more things going on against ours, but I actually had some knowledge of what was going on with their system and some of the problems they had with the releases as some things went down and came back up. And I kind of be almost their secondary monitoring system. I'm not saying you have to do this for every particular type of app, but in that consumer space that we were operating in, it was very good to know what was happening, as well as how we were reacting to the marketplace with our own deliveries compared to them. The other piece is failure to share information. This is where we have team members share information they're all familiar with because it's comfortable. Chelsea, that application we were just working on? Yeah, you've been testing, I did testing. Yeah, it's all good from your side? Yeah, it's good from my side too. Okay, great. Oh, by the way, I got this new data import from this other tool that really screwed up my system. I took care of it from our side. To get to your side, it may be a problem. I don't know, but I'm going to take care of it so you don't have to worry about it. That communication doesn't always happen because we get involved in our own siloed world and what we know, and we want to just communicate the good stuff. So it's one of those things. Keep a conscious effort about the information you're sharing, what you should be sharing. Again, this gets into get someone else's perspective. Then not me always being the one talking to Chelsea because we meet every week, whatever type of deal. Maybe this time I send Chevalier instead. So get somebody else to provide some feedback, some interaction, and some different perspective. Again, being negative provides some good insight. Oh, you wouldn't believe the code they delivered. We got through it, but be careful on your side. We had some issues. I think everything's resolved, but I'd still watch our inputs a little bit better. And just because you have confirming data does not mean everything is right. Kind of going back to keep testing the same stuff you expect, it's going to keep passing because usually that's what people code to is what they expect. Think what exception cases, oh, that's a weird statement. Think what exception cases they should know about and what they should tell you. That is, in this weird circumstance, we had this thing function, our system handled it fine, or after they fixed that bug, we're just fine. Maybe you should watch out for it. Or, hey, do you have any unusual circumstances with user IDs ending in all zeros? Get the feedback loop going, because that's how you get more exposure to what's going on. Again, ask why not. All right, so we want to focus and we don't want to focus. So how do we do both? Well, you have to act along a long-term plan while executing upon your short-term goals. Easier said than done. But it comes back down to that same challenge of breadth versus depth in testing. You have a whole matrix of tests that can be run for any particular type of application. And you can decide how far spread out breadth-wise you want to go. That is, are we going to do all, features of the app across the board in every single browser and OS version supported? Are we going to do it for performance across every single feature component that's involved and system involved? Are we going to do load testing, scalability testing, and put up their volumetric testing? Are we going to do security testing and then all the system integration testing? That's a lot of work right there, just alone, going across the breadth. We haven't dove into the depth. Are we doing just the basic functional, the top level, quote unquote, smoke slash sanity tests? Are we doing alternate functional, some of the more weirder path corner cases? Are we doing combinational matrices? Are we doing database validations and data input, etc.? And of course, again, you still want to consider those negative tests. So just talking there's a huge host of tests that could be done. I can almost guarantee any application you have, you're generally not going to get the budget and or time to do every single thing up on this board, every single release. Now, some of your major ones where you got a long, drawn up, and it's some major financial or some other life-saving apps, of course, that might be different. But most other apps, you'll never get the time to do all that stuff. So what do we have to do? We have to make choices. Usually it's a risk mitigation strategy that takes the forefront. Or we have to use some type of automation, again, to drive as many test cases as possible in combinations, configurations. But these are choices we have to make. And then we have to figure out what type of negative tests we want to do, too. And this is just picking out negative tests because let's talk about that so much. I think that gets kind of neglected in the field. But you have your basic negative tests, which are field validation, SQL inject, boundary testing. I mean, Chris went through a whole slew of them last Trailblazers. You got your misuse tests. These are your unintended and malicious attacks against the system. Figuring out, hey, if I use Fiddler or Burp Suite or some other tool, I don't even have to go through the web interface. I can see if the backend's protected, even though they're stopping it from the data input fields. Abuse failure tests. This is more of your system reliability and expected behavior tests. That is, if I take this server down, and it's something that gets an authorization request, does this thing auto-authorize? Does it behave properly? Does it shut down? Does it still try to stay alive? I think I've talked about it here before, but Netflix is very famous for their simian tests. They have what they call their simian army. And their production system is to have these simian robot tools take things down randomly in their production environment. Stop servers, stop services, disconnect databases, and the whole thing is to make sure their system is robust enough to handle any type of failure. And they built their system and their architecture to support that. They've had documented failures where, well, guess what? The Army proved a fault in the system and the site went down, but they reacted to that, adjusted to it, and so they still have one of the best uptime reliabilities in the industry because they have these running all the time in production. Sounds scary, it should, but you have to have your system set up to support that. White box developer notes. This is kind of a gray area for some people, not gray box testing, but this comes down to source, control, access, and who's authorized or not. But these are some of the tricks that I used to go through when I was doing some security testing for things in the past is, okay, let me go check all the source code check-in notes and see if I can find any of these phrases. Because developers tended to write little notes to themselves if they plan on coming back for certain things. I don't stop doing this now. But that got me to look at, okay, this might be an interesting area to test now because they said, fix me. Even though there's no bugs in the system, I deliver perfect code. And there's some other key phrases you can look at that are used in the industry. Different coding standards with C# versus Java has different quote-unquote common notes they use and things of that nature. But those are windows of opportunity is the way I look at it. But you have to have access to the note or the source control to do it and know where to look. All right. So that's for some of the focus issues and not focus and how you handle it. Last piece here is just kind of thinking longer term as well. Example I'm going to give you is we're trying to build out a continuous delivery system. Okay, started this about a year and a half ago since I arrived. I wouldn't say started it, we talked about it. Probably in the past year, we've been executing upon it. And our goal is to give you a quick primer on continuous delivery is get continuous integration where build deployments automatically happen from development to test based upon check-in. I want to say automatically, it might be we do it 3 times a day just to have some breather window for QA to be able to validate some stuff until we're fully comfortable with it. And then eventually get it to where it goes all the way up to the pre-prod environment, as we call it, at assets, the system integration testing environment, pre-production environment. It gets auto deployed there and can be automated tests and such. And so all this stuff would have automated tests going through the validation process with it. You say it's okay. Now, it's not to say, again, we're replacing manual testers. No, it's just to give that quick, basic assurity that something got built and deployed effectively, that it should be available for manual testing and any other type of UAT testing, depending on the environment that's being pushed to. And our goal is to get it to maybe, and I emphasize maybe, continuous deployment. The difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment is continuous delivery is all the way up to production. Continuous deployment is what the Twitters of the world are doing, is they're pushing it automatically to production that same day, several times a day. Now, our customer base, where we work with hospitals and things, they're probably not going to tolerate multiple pushes a day. Versus your Facebooks, Twitters, they don't care about the customer because they're getting their ad revenue from whoever else. They can push as much as they want, and if you're not paying for it, how much are they going to listen to you complain about it? But some of the bigger customer deployments, that might not be quite as feasible. But we want to get to the point where delivery deployment is a business decision, not a technology decision. That's our whole goal, is remove technology being the limitation of why something gets deployed. If it's been validated, QA'd, and ready, it can go now. Well, you don't want it because the customer can't absorb it, you got to train them. Okay, fine, that's your choice. But you decide as a business when it goes. Well, to move towards this, we got to get some things built out. We require automated build and deployment process running. We don't quite have that there yet. We're using TFS. We got the release management tool of TFS that allows us to do some of that stuff. We're actually in the initial stages of building that out. We actually got a proof of concept kind of running, but we still need to tweak it a bit. We also need our automated test cases running automatically. I mean, automated tests shouldn't require a person to push a button to start manually executing them, or automated execution. So we want to have that as part of the continuous delivery process as well, or continuous integration. We have had it wired up where we're using Teamcity, our QA integration server, where it was doing the auto pushes of the automation code and execution. So it was running every night, midnight, wherever, running every night, all the time. We could look at the reports in the morning and see what happened. Now we've actually built out this automation lab. We have dedicated execution boxes, so we can do multiple browser testing simultaneously or in parallel, whatever I call it. And these guys just got that working this past week. So we now have it running in an automation lab automatically through our own TFS system instead of using the continuous integration server. So even the manual users can go to the button, push the button, and it goes execute there if they want. But to get this done too, it requires the ability to track and be notified of automation execution failures. Right now, we got it so it is actually populating our same manual test cases in the Microsoft Test Manager, so they can see the automation execution results as well as the manual results in the same system. So they get that one quote-unquote view of the world, all intermingled. And we have the data repositories being pushed with the logs. So we're kind of on the path, but we're not there yet. And this is like I'm talking a year. I've been at the company almost 2 years now, a year and a half. And a year of it's been getting all this stuff aligned and things like that, because it doesn't happen overnight. But that's the thing too, is what I'm trying to explain is you got to think forward instead of just always what's right in front of you, and have a plan of action to do so. And of course, get the right people and tools in place, or right consultants, whatever, and execute upon it. So what we want to be able to do later is have performance tests integrated into the continuous integration flow. So we have automatic performance testing, doing some validation checks to see if there's any major delta changes running the same test against the same application sets. We want to have the valid test data query scripts integrated into environment tests. What I mean by that, I know at least when I was at GameStop, they had this situation. We kind of have this with our catalog for the Net Assets group, is where the data that's available to test with can be changing because other people are testing stuff. And so a data element that you had in your data sheet yesterday that works fine might have been changed by somebody else earlier that's no longer valid, or it causes different failures. So we have to have a way to make sure we have applicable data set ready for the automation. And so that's part of what we're going to get integrated there as well. And we want to have performance tests repurposed for data validation tests and kind of a system integration test. I mean, performance tests, I think, are somewhat neglected as to what they can be utilized for. Everybody thinks about performance, load, scalability, stress. Yes, it's great for tools doing that. But you can actually do some fairly, I wouldn't say basic, but interesting system integration tests depending on your infrastructure by using performance tests. Much quicker and easier than you could through a UI test. Now, again, there's pluses and minuses. How much are you getting if you're just doing it in the back end, server requests back and forth versus actually getting the screen display? Yeah, but we're talking faster feedback loops to hopefully react upon quicker and easier. You can still do the UI automation, you probably should, but it's also one of those things that give you that faster feedback loop and repurposing those. A lot of that comes down to the data validation stuff where we have to make sure for our analytics packages, the biggest problem we have is how these ETL transformations import data from hospitals and things of that nature. It kind of gets kludged at times because somebody sends in a different format than what we're expecting and what the tool is doing. And so the analytics package that has all the UI fun stuff to be automated really isn't the problem. It's the data import process that happened earlier that we want to try and catch things before it even gets to that. And I already mentioned the continuous integration servers, automation launch server. We're kind of doing that right now with now TFS kind of turning into our continuous integration server. We're still using TeamCity, but we're kind of in that transition page or place as we're moving off of TeamCity and onto TFS. And we want to repurpose deprecated systems or imitate scriptable audit set for test environments. Blah. What that means is we did this at GameStop, and I think, Paul, you've done it here at Net Assets as well, I believe, where old laptops that were going to be decommissioned, old servers that are going to be decommissioned. We'll take them. You got automation agents now. And we set up a decent lab at GameStop just based on taking some old laptops and servers that they're going to throw out. And that gave us a lab to use. Granted, it wasn't the most rocking one on the planet, but more was better than none. And right now we're moving towards more of the image-based, where we've got 8 agents in one environment for our SCM Tech side. We have another 8 agents in our Corp Tech side for all the automation they have to run. And basically we want to make it so that we get a new box because we want to scale up even more for more automation runs. We just run this one script and the environment's all set, ready to go. It doesn't take another manual intervention, setting up all the IE settings and whatever else. And so that's where we're kind of at right now as well. So just kind of laying out what we're doing and some of the goals we have, and just trying to point out that this isn't happening overnight. It's not going to be done next month, next week, or probably 2 to 3 months from now. It's one of those things like development. When are you done? You're rarely ever done. If you are done, you're moving on to the next project to do that instead. So this is just a point. I forget what the name of this place is, but this is an actual place in England that has this hedge maze that you can walk through. But the point is, obstacles arise in your path of trying to accomplish any goal. It's kind of like Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. You'll get hit in the mouth in your day-to-day job. If you haven't already, then you're the luckiest person I know. But the thing is, too, the drive to the goal makes alternate paths become available, or a better overall goal to be achieved. I don't know how many times I've started something, hey, this is what I want to do, blah, 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 blah. And I go, whoa, Tim. And I get the political, that's not a bad idea, Tim. But if we did this instead of what you just suggested, we could do this, 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 and this. Great, that's not my idea. So it's one of those things. You got to listen and react to the team and get the feedback and find out, hey, if this is going to work, can we try this? If this is going to work, can we try this? Rarely does anything happen in a silo. I mean, great ideas rarely come from a single individual. It's the feedback loop. It's kind of like if you're in Scrum teams and such, where you have the team working on something, trying to figure out points and things like that. Just that collaboration. The same goes with a lot of your goals. If you're trying to achieve, is to work with your team and the people that know the stuff and figure out how they can help you achieve your goals. This is one of my favorite mottos. This came from Walt Disney. Around here, however, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. I think it's a great quote. And I think that's something, not just in work, but something life motto, whatever I call it. I think it's kind of one of those sanity checks about whenever things are rough. How can you possibly adjust? So that's basically what I got. Just remember, everyone has an opinion. And just because they have one doesn't mean that from their perspective, one can be right or one can be wrong. You both can be right or you both can be wrong. And if you haven't figured it out, this is 4 on his side and 3 on that side. All right, that's all I got. If you're interested, I could play another couple interesting quiz videos to check out if your observation skills are up to par. But any questions? Yes, sir. Our continuous integration package, we're transitioning from Team City, which is kind of like Jenkins, but it's a supported version that you pay for. But we're going to Team Foundation Services. We're primarily a Microsoft shop, and we have all our work under management going through that. So we're in the midst of transitioning from that to TFS. It's probably another 6-month project, to be honest. Just because Team City is actually working well for us. They just don't get all the bang for the buck stuff we get with TFS and some of our automation lab components that we have built out. So we're doing a slow, targeted migration versus rip the cord and jump over to it, because it's not like we're getting this huge, huge advantage that we don't already have implemented with Team City.
Going back to your statement that you derive a business rule from negative tests.
Yes.
Do you have any guidelines or suggestions on where do you draw the line between negative tests and invalid scenarios? Like going back to your sequencing example.
Very good question. Very good.
Would you input a negative number, or do you tell your customer, no, this isn't valid, negative numbers?
As a developer, I'm probably the worst person for you to ask this question to, because I come from the defensive programming school of thought, is that the program should be defensive enough to withstand whatever input's coming into it and respond appropriately. But I know that's not always a subscribed method with legacy code and things inherited and got to get it out the door tomorrow versus filling it out properly. So there's not a real answer other than, kind of like, how do you know when you're done testing? There's a judgment/risk mitigation strategy. You're going to have to work with that. I mean, I personally prefer that, let's just say not accept negative numbers, boundary testing. Does that mean you test -1 through -1,000 each independently? No, that's probably a huge waste of time. Automated, sure, it might take 5 minutes, but, why still do it when you could probably use it for other things? Special characters, I mean, I think we got one test in our catalog thing that's testing I don't know how many different special characters, which I'm kind of like, why? But but it's out there and it's running, and we don't have any real limitations on time constraints as yet that we have to throw it back or pull it back any. But at some point in time, if our automation keeps getting built up like I hope and expect it to, then time of execution is going to become a higher priority. And then guess what? Let's curtail that number of tests down to something a little bit more reasonable. But at this point in time, it's like, okay, fine, just run all those tests, even though it's probably all just testing the same thing. So it's not like usually people are doing like weird of each other ASCII values or something like that. It's usually if you're past a certain range. Is that double click here? It's a very good one. Yes, that's always a fun one to do. And I think Chris covered a bunch of those tests. I mean, I had actually last time I was going to do my lovely nefarious testing slide, and then thank God I pulled out because I saw Chris, I'm like, ooh, his is way better, and I still got that for some other Trailblazer in the future if need be. But yeah, there's a lot of tests negative-wise, because the thing is, negative, it's an open-ended box. I mean, you can go just about anywhere with anything if you really want to. So to your point, you got to kind of keep the boundaries within reason, but it's up to the kind of the team and the understanding of what true values need to be expected. Because I've been through other systems, it's like, nope, we're a garbage in, garbage out pass-through system. take whatever this application sends to this service, and we're just pumping it through, nothing, and then it's the other person's application's responsible to handle it. Not necessarily anything wrong with that, but that just also means that you need to have proper validation on each side of the equation, or the entry and exit point. Of course, again, all this stuff is in theory versus when you inherit stuff that's been built out for 5-7 years ago, and everybody was using these great architectural decision rules. Did that answer your question?
And to add to your point, some of the why nots may not be negative testing, but if a why not comes at a requirement analysis phase, it adds a lot of value. There are so many instances in my project where the requirements are changed or design is changed because the QA people, or some not necessarily QA, even for dev, ask those questions, why can't we do it this way at a requirement analysis phase? And that actually they rechurn the process, they remove the requirements. So why not necessarily means a negative testing with the special characters. That is probably at the low end at UI level. But if a why not comes at an early stage, it adds lots of value. And I'm glad you put that in your presentation actually, because that answers one of the questions that brought up in the morning. Do we need testing? Testers are required versus, I think, some artificial intelligence is something that someone mentioned. That answers the questions on what is the importance of a tester, saying that they think through this process of, okay, if there's a requirement, we just don't go by a rule. Yeah. We try to break it with different scenarios and stuff.
Yeah, and I'll say there are some realities to some of the suggestions here. And I'll speak from my own personal reality I'm dealing with. I have a team in our Alpharetta corporate office that I got 4 QA people responsible for about 16 apps. And they're all being developed simultaneously. And it's coming through a chain that, guess what? All they can do is oh my gosh, rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp. I did these quick validations. And then we get questioned, well, why are you only doing positive tests? I was like, well, you either A, got to give me more resources and budget, or B, you got to accept this, or C, you're going to have to invest in automation along with it. Even the automation wouldn't solve that, to be honest. But that's where you get into the reality of the situation. Is like, yeah, that's all we're going to get done is positive tests if you're going to be throwing 16 apps down their throats every 2 weeks, and there's only 4 of them splitting it between all those projects. So there's some realities of the world that have to be accounted for too. You tell me. Yeah. I don't say I'm managing. I'm pushing and seeding. No. Yeah, that's actually a really good question. The thing is, to me, and I've said this before, and I think some other people have said it as well, is quality, it's not a technical decision. It's a business decision. I mean, as much as QA people would skewer me and hang me from a cross or whatever, burn me at the stake for saying this, we don't control quality in QA. We can only report what the issues are, make recommendations, and give information for somebody with the appropriate business decision capability to make that decision. And the business is the one that usually decides what funding goes into it, what schedule things get done. And so I always put it back to the business. That is, okay, this is what we can do in this time frame. Just like example I was given, like, you're only going to get positive testing. You're only going to get a limited amount of work. You're comfortable with that and can accept the consequences when things don't come screaming down my door because things got released to production because you accepted this process. And I get them, okay, of course, everybody says okay until something happens. But you actually have that conversation and quote-unquote buy-off. I don't know if it's ever really bought off, even though they nod their head. But it's also just explaining, it's like, you have X amount of dollars for all your projects. And of course, QA is always looked at as the cost center. As you're not adding any value. You're just costing me money. Developers, yeah, they're providing stuff. So I can justify that, but you're just costing me money. So that's where they usually get the constraints of, like, they don't want to put so much into the QA aspect because, hey, the developers can test their own stuff, which some can effectively for some things. As Chris pointed out, you probably don't want to subscribe to that model day in, day out. But it's really a business decision. And that's where I try to make it with our business. Like, you'll get this for this. You want to pay this much work? Okay, we'll do all your priority 1 test cases. That's what I can commit to based on the research. Oh, you want to get more depth? Well, you want priority 1 and 2? Then guess what? You're going to have to come up with more money to cover the resource hours for that. And it's just kind of that negotiation / understanding. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is too much, in my previous experience, it's been, you will deliver this on this date of this X amount of quality. It's like, no, we'll deliver this with these constraints, and you signing off on this is what you're going to accept, or we're going to just delay the release. And that's where it kind of comes down to what the business relationship is as well. There's no easy solution to it. I mean, if it was, I'd be making millions. Anything else? Cool. Anybody want to see this stuff?
good day. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for the presenters, especially all the preparation that goes into building these. Just want to remind you, Systemware helps our clients and consultants kind of find each other. So if you've got friends, associates, anywhere in the IT business, not just QA, then let us know. We'd be glad to help them, both here and then in Atlanta also. We have a branch office. We're going to do this again probably in the May timeframe. It's what our usual schedule is. Get everyone back here before summer. So especially anyone that's new, if you've got any great ideas and you can picture yourself up here, we'd love to have you. So thanks very much. Have a good afternoon. We'll see you next time.